Good morning. Bonus points if you can put in the chat what movie that song is from. Mark Jones, how are you?
I'm good, but I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not going to give the answer just yet in case somebody does know. All right. Well, it is June. I can't believe it. Rick Hale, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. We have made it 5 months through the year. And I feel pretty good about that because it's just a weird year, right?
It is.
And I say that when it's weird in a good way sometimes and weird in a bad way sometimes, but that's just what the real estate market is. It's never stable. It's always either going up or going down or bouncing around and all the above. So let's jump in. All right. Get my screen pulled up here. I want to play a video real quick. Let me make sure my sound is playing. Hang on 2 seconds. And then we're going to talk through this because there's some weird stuff going on. Let me get this up here. Come on.
Here we go. The first MLS has stepped up and said we will not adhere to the NAR settlement requiring the removal of any compensation fields or anything like that in their MLS because they feel like it's bad for the consumer and transparency overall. Northwest MLS, which represents about 35,000 agents across Washington states and in parts of Oregon, is saying, hey, we were already making changes. We already were requiring some kind of signed agreement before showing homes. And we think this is bad for the consumer. And they went even further. They went even further and said the decision by NAR with the settlement eliminates compensation transparency for buyers and restrains sellers' choice by prohibiting sellers from making offers of compensation through the MLS, a change that is a step in the wrong direction and detrimental to consumers and brokers alike. And I couldn't agree more. I talked about this in detail on my last podcast episode. They went even further to say that removing compensation fields will push consumers and brokers to make secret deals inviting deceptive practices, discrimination, and unfair housing, which could be especially detrimental to first-time buyers and others who are already disadvantaged. And again, I could not agree more. Now, it's important to note that this is a non-NAR owned MLS, and so therefore they're not a part of the settlement, but they could have paid into the settlement fund on the outside, which with their amount of membership would have been about about $3.5 million. Now, where does this go from here? You know, we are in an election year, and I think that if the
All right. So the first MLS, which is not FMLS, it's the MLS up in Washington State and Oregon, is now coming out and saying they're not going to follow trend by removing everything out of the MLS. And then on Inman today, Bright MLS, which is the nation's second largest MLS, which is also not owned by the Association of Realtors, is saying they will allow sellers to offer concessions upon listing. Now, whether that means buyer agency compensation or just a field that says this is a concession offering is to be determined. Yet I want to talk about this for a second because I have two thoughts, and then I want to kind of kick it to Rick and Mark and get y'all's thoughts too. But my two thoughts are: one, when new legislation comes at our industry, and new legislation comes all the time, there's usually a big tightening that happens in the industry. And then at some point in time, it releases a bit of that tightening. And there's usually some kind of middle ground where the world lands, right? It doesn't mean it all goes away. It doesn't mean it's as strict as the original thought is going to be. But yet, I think what we're starting to see is a little loosening based on where the original tightening thought process was around this NAR settlement. And FMLS is not owned by the Association of Realtors, so they're not obligated to follow suit, which they may make a play like this as well. We don't know yet. And then the second thing is we're kind of weird in the sense that we're also Georgia MLS. which is owned by the Association of Realtors. So we kind of play in both fields. And then my other thought, which I haven't actually fully vetted this thought, but this is a raw thought, and then I'll kick it to Rick and Mark. But because we settled the lawsuit, I don't know that we could do it even if the MLS allowed us to. And I don't know what that implication means, but because we settled and said we would not offer buyer agent compensation in the MLS, even if the MLS says you can, I don't know that we would, or anybody else that settled would be able to play the game that way. So it's still new, but I think it's certainly worthy of a conversation. I'll shut up. Mark, Rick, what are your thoughts?
So I'll start. The first thing is that because we're members of KW who settled the lawsuit, and we're members of NAR who settled the lawsuit, like we have two legal reasons joining us from doing that. The other thing is this particular article, concessions don't equal compensation. And the settlement's actually explicit and says concessions are allowed. I think the big deal here is that they're saying they'll allow you to do it at the time of listing. In other words, as soon as the listing hits the market, you're going to be able to know that these people are offering $3,500 in closing costs or concessions to the buyer that buys this property, things like that. So I think it's interesting to watch how these companies are innovating around this. And I think it also puts their members of these non-MLS owned or non-realtor owned MLSs in a really precarious situation because they can allow it, but that doesn't mean their members are legally allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, job one is to create an environment where buyers and sellers, come together and is conducive to win-win opportunities and experiences. The second most important thing is to eliminate as much liability for what happened going forward. So we're just dancing down the middle right now, trying to figure out that counterbalance position. And I think we should leave it to the attorneys. And
Yeah.
I'm sure NAR can afford really good legal, representation, and it'll illuminate itself
Maybe
over
not
time.
now.
That's a good point. Their budget probably did get dented.
Right.
But I'm assuming there's some
Nonetheless,
post-traumatic legal support
Yeah.
somewhere.
I mean, here's the thing is, we're just watching it. I think FMLS could hit the news cycle tomorrow and say, hey, we're going to follow Bright MLS and offer compensation or excuse me, I want to get the word right, concessions in the MLS, and we'll navigate that when it happens. But my guess is FMLS and Bright MLS are two powerhouse MLSs that are not owned by the Association of Realtors, and I guarantee you they're talking offline.
It'll be interesting to see if Northwest MLS gets sued by the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes you don't want to be in the innovator
Early adopter.
category here.
Yeah.
I love that they're testing the market to see what, where the boundaries are for us,
100%. I think we'll find our happy medium regardless, because that's just what happens. All right. Fulton County. Right now, inventory went up to 973. I love that number. We got close to, we got over 1,000 at the beginning of May. We're close to 1,000 at the beginning of June. This is healthy for us. Active under contract 128. That's a little down. And I say it's a little down. If you look at the last 3 weeks compared to the 3 weeks prior, 157, 142, 163. I want you to hear what I'm saying around some of these numbers, because some of the articles we're going to talk about here in a minute talks about softening demand, some sellers having to adjust prices. And I want you to see it in the numbers first before we actually get to those articles. But there's 250 pending, which is a little bit down. And then our closings end of the month are 234. Now, I do believe there's a realtor factor inside this number.
For sure.
Ask yourself the question, if you closed a property on Friday at the last day of the month, have you changed the status in the MLS? My guess is about half of you have and half of you have not. So that's probably not 100% true number from last week because there was a abundance of closings on Friday. But nonetheless, it certainly looks like we're trending down a little bit. Let's see what the other counties say. So DeKalb went up, active inventory at 562, which is high for DeKalb, which is healthy. And then active under contract at 83 is pretty strong, maybe a little off from April. But it's been holding for the most part, maybe a little bit down, but not much. Pendings at 178 is a little bit softer than what it was. And then closings at 151, again, realtor factor, but we're certainly not over 200 like we had in a couple weeks in early May. So a little off, right? And then Cobb County inventory went up to 480, which we're not over 500, but 480 seems to be a healthy number since the beginning of April for Cobb County, with 100 active under contract, a little bit off. And then pendings at 192 is certainly down under 200, where we had 4 weeks, 4 or 6 weeks over 200. And then closings at 163, realtor factor certainly looks like it's a little bit slower. So, Luke pulled some numbers for me this morning, and let me get my text thread up with him. So the numbers in MLS right now, oh, come on, computer. Hang on, my computer is moving slow. I apologize. Almost there. All right. He said, looking at May stats, obviously it's only the third of the month, which we know realtors haven't closed them all out. He said, we're currently only 6,000 closed sales for May compared to last year's May of 8,200. So what that tells me is I don't think we're going to end at 6,000, but I don't think there's 2,000 closings that haven't been put into MLS. So that tells me May was softer than May last year. What do y'all think of that?
That's a good question. There
It
seems
may
to
be
be
new
some
information to you, right?
Well, there seems to be some general seasonality that's still happening. You know, that people are listing their homes as the spring market rolls around, things like that. But we're still not seeing the typical spring seasonality we used to see, where it consistently follows a pattern of which months are higher than which. It's just all over the map because a lot of it is market driven by the interest rates, and as the interest rates go up and down, people are pausing and going. So
yeah. So let's assume this May comes in below May last year. We were neutral through the first 2 months. Then we were down in March, a little bit up in April, and we're probably going to be down in May. I could say we're trending with last year, or I actually think we're probably a little bit behind last year in terms of just home sales in the general market. I don't love that, to be honest. I'd started the year saying, hey, we're going to be 15% over last year, but it's not showing up that way. And Mark, I think the biggest factor is this.
Rates, yeah. Well, and inventory keeps climbing. So as inventory climbs and sales are either stagnant or lower, inevitably there's going to be compression on pricing. So, and it may take longer to sell a house. Days on market's inevitably going to climb in light of what we're seeing in the last data chain you showed.
Yeah.
And I know KWRI has already lowered their projection from last year being 4.1 million in sales total. They projected at the beginning of the year, they were saying 4.3 million this year. And now they're saying probably more like 4.1, the same as last year. So their projections have gone down as the market is playing out for the first half of the year.
Yeah. I'm guessing our days on market in May came in higher than 15. We'll see, right? And 15 doesn't sound like a big number, but it's just showing the trend softening a little bit, maybe. And while we go back to these numbers and we're all excited that inventory is up or supply is up, what you can't see in these numbers is demand, right? And I mean, you can see some demand with the number of people going under contract, yet there's got to be some pent up demand that is people that would buy a house, but they're not buying a house right now. And I think they are trying to wait on affordability, or they're trying to wait on some kind of interest rate change, which we know as experts, it doesn't pay to wait, but that doesn't mean our messaging makes it to the mind of every consumer, right?
Well, and all the economists right now are saying that they don't expect interest rates to get below 6.5. In fact, now they're saying that 6.5 is wishful thinking for the end of the year. So I don't see rates changing a whole lot between now and then, other than the weekly up and down that it does.
There you go. All right. Well, we're all full of good news this morning. All right. So moving on. Here's some good news. VA is waking up. So if you're not familiar, a VA loan product it's forbidden for a buyer to pay any kind of buyer agent commission. So if you had a buyer that had to pay a buyer agent commission to you, they would not be able to pay that and use a VA loan, or would have to use a different loan product. So VA was the last holdout. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, they all said they would allow for buyer agent commission to not count against the percentage they allowed for closing cost assistance. And VA is finally said they're going to temporarily suspend buyer agent ban. I think that's a good thing, not just for us, but for veterans, because a veteran that wants to buy a house and wants to use a VA loan, the whole point of zero down in a VA loan means we're going to help you get into housing at minimal to no cost. And our legal environment kind of made that weird for them.
Now, this is one of those unintended consequences of these new rules that needed to be fixed, and VA has taken steps towards fixing it, at least in a temporary fashion. And I think they're just waiting for the final rules to roll out before they make a permanent ruling on this. But I foresee this staying this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, their goal is to protect veterans, and unfortunately, in the current climate, it doesn't. It creates a lack of competitive opportunity, to be honest.
There you go. All right. So this article, why is my computer moving slow? It says sellers are cutting prices at record pace to combat softening demand. Now, I take a little issue with the title of this article, but there's some truth inside of it.
Are you saying Inman uses clickbait headlines?
Yes, I am, Mark.
No,
I don't
way.
think they're cutting it at record pace, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And I don't think demand is softening. I think to say it's softening means it was here and then it softened and there's less demand. I think demand is equal to what it was last year. As you can see, we're equal in home sales. We're just not experiencing the increase in demand that we had all hoped we would be seeing by now. And it's just being suppressed by interest rates and affordability and all that fun stuff. But um, I don't think softening is the right term. But then again, if we went back to the numbers, I could make a case that less people are going under contract right now. What do you think about that term?
I think it's a clickbait headline because record pace. I mean, they're quoting one stat. I'm assuming that shows, slightly less than the record. So, at a record pace, yes, more sellers cut prices on their homes last month than probably any June or any May rather prior. That said, it's not like it's a big change.
No,
Yeah.
and it's also reflective of probably a significant amount of the data stemming from Florida and Texas that had record increases. And so the reflected number is a national number, not necessarily a local number. In fact,
Yeah.
it's not.
So here's
Point.
kind of the meat of it. It's saying sticky mortgage rates and rising median home prices created a slower than usual spring home buying season. Slower than usual, yes. Slower than last year, no. With the age of inventory rising for the first time in 8 months to a median of 46 days, we are nowhere near 46 days in median inventory in Atlanta. But unsurprisingly, sellers began slicing asking prices. 6.4% of listings experienced a price reduction in May. So this doesn't mean they're selling at a loss. It might mean that they had an aspirational price and had to come off their aspirational price.
Right.
But the leading median asking prices declined $3,000 or 0.71% to 416,000. The second article, which talks about the same thing in the Atlanta Business Chronicle, same headline, but there's an extra stat, and it says data from the real estate firm shows 6.4% of active listings, same stat, had a price drop through the week ending May 26th. While that's not a massive portion of listings, the percentage is substantially higher than 4.4% of the listings with price drops recorded at the same time. So a 2% difference in price reductions. Now, I want you to think about this. If we have 10,000 listings, what's 2%? Trick question. 200.
200, yeah. I mean, out of 100, this is even easier. Out of 100 listings, 2 more out of 100 reduce their price, and it could be $1 or 100,000. It's not framed in any real substantive data.
Yeah. So, okay, yes, there's more price reductions than in the past, but not like 20% more. We're talking 2% more. And the other thing I think about is of those 100 listings, Rick, only 6.4 of them actually reduced their price. That means 93.6 did not.
Yeah. That would be impressive if that were the market in general. Typically it's higher than that.
Yeah. So I think while news sells and all that fun stuff, do I think the market's a little bit softer than maybe we wanted it to be? Or maybe if supply is raising and demand is staying constant, that relationship gap is getting bigger. So frustrated sellers might be more prone to have a price adjustment. But I still think it's what causes houses to sell? The property, staging, great pricing, great marketing. As long as the good agents are on top of this and pricing appropriately and marketing appropriately and staging appropriately, this is not your playbook, as the thing here says.
Well, and realize it doesn't qualify that percentage by the average sales price that it's reflective of. In other words, what percentage of houses over 1 million reduce price before they sell versus 300 or 400,000, which often still have competing offers and go above asking. So it's
100%.
not, it's clickbait.
Now here's some good news. So Atlanta home values surpassed milestone amid record high national sales prices. So the median price broke 400,000 in Atlanta city limits last month. Atlanta home values have risen 2% over the past year and 16% since April of 2021. So what's the national average home price appreciation over the last 50 years?
4%.
4%. So it's a little bit behind the national average, but it's not negative, it's positive. Meaning we're still appreciating in spite of all these previous conversations, the prices are still appreciating at 2% a year right now.
Right. And again, it's also hyper local. So some neighborhoods are higher than that, some are a little bit lower. So
Yeah. You know, I see all this stuff and you might be listening thinking, oh, the real estate market's weird right now, or how do I win? How do I find my the strategy to navigate a winning strategy here? I think it's the lost art of selling real estate, guys. I mean, it's have aggressive strategies to go generate leads, have great pricing strategies, great marketing efforts. The tried and true way of selling real estate is winning right now. And the problem is over the last 3 to 5 years, it was easier to win without having to work as hard for it. But the skill set you develop right now, the mindset you instill right now around winning will drastically catapult your career going forward. And that's the encouragement. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think this all just reinforces for me to focus on the D's, right? The life events that are necessitating people to move regardless of what the rates are and regardless of what the current rate on their existing mortgage is. And that's diapers, diplomas, diamonds, debt, divorce, disability, death, downsizing, distance, diversification. Like, look at those life events and create a strategy around attracting people that have those needs, and you'll be fine because those people buy in any market.
There you go, Rick. Last words. You're the wise one.
It comes down to differentiation. How do you differentiate? And the greatest way to do it's not in the words you use, but in the data you share. So this is the perfect time to start your, comparative data chain to see month over month, what are you doing and that's showing results that others aren't, so that you have a competitive advantage. And then what are you doing that others aren't doing that creates more conversations that lead to the list of D's Mark mentioned.
There you go.
Activities bring results.
We start and end on time. Have a good week.
See you guys.
See you guys.